All right. Good morning, Delaware, and thank you for joining the News Journal and DelawareOnline.com. I'm Ed Forbes, Senior Director for Opinion. Joining us this morning live are members of the Delaware Congressional Delegation, Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester, Senator Tom Carper, and Senator Chris Coons. Welcome, all of you. And along with us are my colleagues, Delaware Online staff writers Meredith Newman and Sarah Gamart. Welcome, friends. So as we begin, as we reported last week in a headline, a Delaware man just marked 100 days in the White House. President Biden is capitalizing or trying to capitalize on slim majorities, Democratic majorities in both the House and Senate, to press legislation through to address dozens of priorities. So let me kick the conversation off here by asking each of you where Delaware has fit into that equation and what your top priorities are this Congress. And so as we get going, Senators and Congresswoman, I hope you can keep your answers brief. And Representative Blunt Rochester, why don't you begin?
Thank you, first of all, to the News Journal and to all that are watching. I would say, first of all, that Joe Biden's and Kamala Harris, Senator, now Vice President Kamala Harris's first 100 days have been transformative. And I always think of it in sort of like three buckets. That as a country, we have to recover, we have to rebuild, and we have to restore. And in terms of recovery, I think that was both economically as well as physically. And so the ability to put so many shots in arms, to the ability to pass the American Rescue Plan, I think has been nothing but transformational in terms of helping us to recover both physically as well as economically. Then we have to rebuild. And that's what the next two big packages are about the American Family Plan as well as the Jobs Plan, is about rebuilding and building back better. And then the last and probably one of the most important is restoration. We have to restore our standing in the world, which I've already witnessed this through the administration's efforts, as well as doing this in a way that provides equity across all agencies and across everything that we do. And so I would say, consistent with that, for me, one of the biggest priorities is going to be a comprehensive jobs agenda. And that's one of the things that I'm working on, everything from the things that go into creating jobs. And that's why I started a bipartisan Future of Work caucus, to the things that help support jobs, like childcare and making sure that people have affordable housing and that they have a clean slate in terms of justice and reforms there. And so those are some of the things, and I think my colleagues would agree. We are proud of what the Biden-Harris administration is already doing and excited for what's to come.
Very good. Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Carper, what are your top priorities this session?
Chris and Lisa recall the day before the president was inaugurated, had a sort of a farewell send-off at the Delaware National Guard headquarters in Newcastle, named after Beau Biden. And we had a chance to share just a few. He spoke, and we had a chance to spend a few minutes. We just walked around and talked with all of us individually. And I reminded him of the words of a Sussex County Methodist minister, now deceased, Reverend Reynolds. And Chris and Lisa have heard me talk about Reverend Reynolds a time or two, and so I'll ask them to bear with me. But when I was had been elected governor, Reverend Reynolds came to see me, and he said, Governor Tom, here's some advice. I said, go ahead, Reverend Reynolds. He said, the main thing is to keep the main thing, the main thing. And I said, would you say that again? And he said, the main thing is to keep the main thing, the main thing. And I said to Joe Biden that day, the main thing is to keep the main thing, the main thing. He actually remembered Reverend Reynolds. And I said to Joe, I said, the main thing is to get this pandemic in our rearview mirror. The main thing is to create as many vaccinations, to begin vaccinating the people of this country and vaccinate as many of them as quickly, as safely as we can. But at the beginning of January this year, I think 5 million people have been vaccinated. Today, we're about, I think, now 200 million people on our way. That's the way to get the economy moving. That's the way to start restoring the spirit of this country. And we have been all over this. This is one of the some of the things that unites Democrats and Republicans. The other thing that I'd say, we're only as good as a governor, as a county executive, or as a mayor, whatever. We're only as good as the people around us. Joe Biden has nominated just terrific men and women, smart, capable, honest, just nice people with good values. And one of the things that Chris and I spend a lot of time doing is trying to get them confirmed, and so that the team will be in place, and we're making pretty good progress on that. I'm going to mention two quick things that were in that are important to me, and one of those is the infrastructure. I chair the committee on Environment and Public Works. We have jurisdiction over roads, highways, bridges. We have jurisdiction over water, drinking water, wastewater, water sanitation. And we passed, with Chris's support, by 89-2, the bipartisan water bill for drinking water, for water sanitation about 2 weeks ago. And next week, we're going to take up in my committee, we'll take up roads, highways, and bridges, surface transportation. And the largest source of carbon emission in our planet comes from our mobile sources, our cars, trucks, and vans. And we want to create corridors of electric charging stations, fueling stations, hydrogen stations all across this country to help combat climate. So those are some of the priorities as well. A lot of them actually create jobs and strong economy and economic opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Coons.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for a chance to be with you today, and to everyone who's watching. As the Congresswoman and Senator have referenced, the American Rescue Plan, which we passed soon after President Biden was inaugurated, has delivered relief checks to 160 million Americans, as well as getting 200 million vaccine shots in arms. About 60% of Delawareans and all Americans have at least had their first shot. And we have to keep our eye on that primary goal of getting folks vaccinated and getting out of this pandemic. We're not there yet. But we're also now working on significant generational investments in infrastructure, as Senator Carper mentioned. Here in Delaware, we've got 19 bridges and 250 plus miles of highway that are in poor condition. And that's just representative of the country as a whole. And so I'm working hard as an appropriator, as one of the senators who votes on what we get to spend, to complement the work that Senator Carper is doing as chairman of the Authorizing Committee for Public Works, to make sure that we pass a robust and bipartisan infrastructure package. We're pushing for $800 billion. This is a critical week to getting that bill done. And then as we move forward, not just getting the core of President Biden's American Jobs Plan passed, but also the American Family Plan. And there are some key pieces of that I support as well, such as providing more support for quality daycare, for affordable community college, for investments in training and support for families across our country. That'll occupy a lot of the next few months. Last point, I spent time this weekend talking to members of both the House and Senate about policing reform, something that we are close to having a negotiated resolution on, and that I hope will also move to the floor of the Senate. Once we get through working on infrastructure and on an important bill that's on the floor this week that will invest in manufacturing and R&D to help make us more competitive with China.
Thank you, Senator. I think what we'll do now is Meredith and Sarah both have some questions, and so I'm going to turn things over to Meredith, who will get the first set of volleys. So Meredith, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We're so appreciative of your time. There's so much that we want to ask you, but I think for a lot of us, we've been watching what's been unfolding in Gaza this weekend. And so I just wanted to start off with the senators, but of course, Congresswoman, please jump in. There's been a growing list of senators who have added their names calling for a ceasefire. I'm curious for Senator Coons and Senator Carper, where you stand on this, if you plan to add your name, and if not, why. Senator Coons, we can start with you.
Meredith, that's something that was only brought to my attention late last night. And frankly, as you know, from the beginning of this call, I was fairly preoccupied with writing my father-in-law's obituary and planning his memorial service. When I get to Washington later today, I will sit down with my staff and talk with them about what exactly that call means, what the position is of the Biden administration, what the position is of the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Obviously, all of us hope for a reduction in violence, but there's some very strong feelings on both sides about whether Israel and its right to defend itself should be our principal message, whether calling for an end by Hamas of rocket attacks on civilian populations in Israel should be our principal focus, or whether calling for an end to IDF assaults and attacks on Gaza should be our principal focus. As you know, I was frankly preoccupied this weekend with family matters and have not looked into this yet.
Senator Carper?
Yeah. Chris Van Hollen, who's one of our colleagues, he's a senator from Maryland, he called me yesterday, and he said that one of our new senators from Georgia, John Ossoff, was introducing a resolution and inviting Democrats and Republicans to co-sponsor it, calling on for both sides, both the Hamas and the Israelis, to observe a ceasefire and to see if we can make it stick with their direct commitment. I told him that I'd be happy to sign on. And Senator Coons is a member of about 5 different committees, which is a lot of committees, and he's getting to be a senior member already on the Foreign Relations Committee. A lot of us will be looking to him for further steps to do next. We're also looking to the administration. And this administration, I think, is a little more even-handed in terms of how we deal with the Palestinians and the Israelis, and try to get them to at a bargaining table, negotiating table. One of the challenges is the election process. I think in Israel, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, I think the Israelis have had like 4 elections in the last 3 or 4 years. Netanyahu, nobody can put together a government that will actually stick. And the Palestinians have not, I don't know that they've had an election of any consequence for a decade or more. And so a lot of this, there's equal blame to go around here. And frankly, equal. Let me just leave it at that.
And some big news to come out of last week was the forming of the bipartisan commission to look into the January 6th insurrection. For all 3 of you who were there that day, I'm curious what question you hope the commission answers that you're still wondering yourself. Congresswoman, we can start off with you.
I first want to start off by also mentioning that, similar to the senators, we want to see peace in the Middle East. And I think that, a lot of times, whether it is issues of policing or issues of global security and peace, we get into boxes and we forget what the real goal is. And so, for us in the House, this is also a major issue. We have also this weekend been looking at where we go from here. This moment during some of the holiest times to have fighting and war is not the direction that we want to see. And so this is also an issue that's very important to the House. As you talked about the January 6th insurrection, we know that we now have a commission that is to be established. And I recently heard yesterday Chairman Benny Thompson, who chairs Homeland Security, talk about the bipartisan work to create this. I am hopeful, though, because we have not yet heard Leader McCarthy say that he is going to sign off on this. And there are many questions that I have regarding this insurrection. First of all, back to the issue of peace. I was one of the people that was trapped up in the gallery when the insurrection took place. And there are questions about what led up to this, what steps were taken in terms of potential tours that were given before. There are questions about what contributed to the big lie. And then we are also looking at a package that is, I think, about $1.9 trillion to help with security and infrastructure. As we talk about infrastructure, even making sure that the Capitol and Capitol Police and others have what they need. To me, one of the biggest challenges of that moment was that we talk a lot about moving forward and we talk about reconciliation. But even when we look at places around the world, like South Africa, there was truth before there was reconciliation. And so what I'm looking for is truth, accountability, and then reconciliation.
Senator Carper?
Yeah. I serve one of my other committees is called the Committee on Homeland Security. And I remember to this day being on a train en route to Washington, D.C. when my staff called me at about 8:30 in the morning and said there's been an attack on one of the World Trade Centers, one of the high rises in downtown Manhattan. And I think that it was an accident. 20 minutes later, they called me back and said another airplane has gone into the World Trade Center. and it's not an accident. And that really changed the world. We created, with the approval of my committee, created a nonpartisan commission called the 9/11 Commission. There are about 10 people on the commission. There are two co-chairs. One is Lee Hamilton, a wonderful Democrat congressman from Indiana. The Republican is Tom McKean, a wonderful Republican governor just on the other side of the Delaware River. And the two of them co-chaired the 9/11 Commission. Ultimately, after, and they had great staff, and after months of work, they presented to us 40-some recommendations unanimously. We adopted them unanimously. And the idea was to make sure that, find out what went wrong, what can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And what the key there was the selection of the co-chairs. I remember having a hearing. They were presenting their findings and recommendations, and I asked, how was it that the two of you, two co-chairs, were able to develop such a strong bond and provide great leadership? And they said they got to know each other. They spent days together, poring over information, getting to know each other and becoming friends, and it trickled down to the other members of the commission. But they focused on root causes, not just the symptoms of that problem, the 9/11 attack, but what caused that. What we need to get at here is, what are the root causes that created the mayhem? Took several lives and could have taken a whole lot more on January the 6th. That's what we need to get to. And the selection of the co-chairs of that commission, the people who make it up, are just critically important. We learned that in 9/11.
And Senator Coons.
And what I hope comes out of a commission looking back on January 6th is both clarity about conclusions, about the legitimacy of the election. The Congress of the United States has certified the election of 2020, and Joe Biden is the duly elected president of the United States. But we still have members of Congress who refuse to accept that, and our former president has repeatedly and publicly refused to accept that. So I hope there will be some clarity, some focus on the significance of the action of Congress, even after the insurrectionists stormed the Capitol and managed to breach it and interrupt our work that night for 5 hours. Don't take my word for it. You know, Mitch McConnell, the Republican majority leader at the time, gave a focused speech on the floor of the Senate about how the election was over, Joe Biden had won it, and we needed to move forward with certification. There continues to be a fight within the Republican Party over whether or not to accept the legitimacy of the 2020 election, and that is a serious challenge for us as a democracy. Second, I want to make sure that we've done everything we can to understand why the brave and dedicated members of the Capitol Police were so overwhelmed and were not reinforced in time, and actionable intelligence was not acted on appropriately. We've spent now months with thousands of National Guardsmen and a large fence ringing the Capitol complex. I think for most Americans, that's receded from view. It's not something you think about or focus on every day. But every time I go into the Capitol, I get a very bracing, visible reminder. There are armed troops on duty patrolling my building, the Russell Senate Office building. And I think, to the point the Congresswoman made, for us to be reconciled with the members of the Senate and House who supported this insurrection, there needs to be more clarity about what actually happened, what its costs are, and how we ensure it doesn't happen again.
And Meredith, if I could add one other thing, because I think both of the senators really touched on so many things that are important. Senator Carper mentioned root causes. And one of my concerns is that even after we've watched our President Joe Biden have bipartisan meetings, you know, folks will walk out of the room, send a massive email, and raise millions of dollars on that email. Even as they developed a bipartisan approach to coming up with this 9/11 style commission that included language, letters from our colleagues across the aisle, their leadership, there's still part of the challenge is that people are running every 2 years, and the goal is to win, win, win. But the goal needs to be to win for the American people. And that even if you lose your seat and you save democracy, it was worth it. And that's our test right now. We got a physical test with this pandemic. We also have a larger test of who are we as a country and as a democracy. And this is the moment. We'll see what we do.
Ironically, right behind where the speaker sits and presides, there are some words in Latin. Same thing in the Senate, where behind where the presiding officer sits. And the words are e pluribus one. And we, as a country, coming out of this election, we need a president who can unite us, not divide us. And things like the 9/11 turned out to be a uniting moment, that thanks in large part to the leadership of George W. Bush. This pandemic, the economy, climate change, the attack on our democracy, they can be things that divide us as a country, or they can be episodes that unite us as a country. I think we have a leader right now in Joe Biden who's a pretty good leader. He's not a guy who builds walls. He's a bridge builder, and that will stand him and I think our country well too.
And that's actually a perfect transition to my last question. I wanted to briefly touch upon the passing of Governor Pete DuPont. And I think for a lot of people here in Delaware, he represented a brand of politics, a brand of Republican politics, of bipartisanship that might not be seen in this current moment. I'm curious for all of you, you mentioned that some of your Republican colleagues won't even acknowledge the results of this election. What's the line between getting things done together, but then also just getting things done, especially when you have midterms approaching? I'm curious how you view bipartisanship right now in 2021. Senator Coons, we can start with you.
Well, thank you, Meredith. I think genuine bipartisanship is more urgent than it's ever been. I think showing the American people that we can legislate and deliver solutions to the challenges and problems that they and their families face, and showing the world that we can legislate and function as a democracy is absolutely critical. When some of our most senior foreign policy, national security advisors to our president met with the Chinese, one of the things that they put on the table was that the Chinese believe that our democracy is failing and flawed and unable to act in a way that strengthens us in the face of a persistent challenge by the Chinese on the world stage. That's why I think it is so important that this coming week, we're taking a vote at 5:30 today, and this coming week on the floor of the Senate, we will be amending and hopefully passing a bold bipartisan bill that will help strengthen our hand by investing in manufacturing and R&D here in the United States. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. We had a robust and thorough debate and markup about this bill. It ultimately passed that committee 21-1. Virtually every member, Republican and Democrat. The only holdout was Senator Rand Paul. Another version of this bill, the investments in manufacturing, passed the Commerce Committee 24-4 last week. I think bipartisanship is difficult. It is hard to stick out your hand and shake hands with and then try and work with someone who disagrees with you so strongly, as many of our colleagues do, particularly after January 6th. But I think it's urgent for the health of our democracy here at home and for our strength on the world stage. And Meredith, I've heard from several foreign heads of state and foreign ministers that they're watching closely. January 6th sent a message throughout the world as this iconic symbol of democracy in the United States was stormed by an angry mob at the direction of our former president, the instigation of our former president. And I think it's critical that we prove that we can still work together and get things done.
Senator Carper?
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question again. I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
Sure. So the passing of Pete DuPont made me think a lot about how his brand and style of politics, specifically within the GOP, might not exist or is not as visible these days. I'm curious for you how you view bipartisanship in 2021 and what's the line between passing important legislation and passing legislation with bipartisan support.
Let me tell you how I know Pete DuPont. I've been a naval flight officer in the Vietnam War and moved to Delaware to get an MBA at the University of Delaware and continue to fly with the Navy Reserve. I ended up literally my first year in Delaware becoming the treasurer and fundraiser in a congressional campaign for a guy that Lisa and Chris know well, Jim Sells, beloved professor at the University of Delaware. And I ended up, and his opponent in that campaign was Pete DuPont. And so I was literally 1 year into Delaware, the treasurer and fundraiser of the Democrat running against Pete DuPont. And I got to know him during the campaign. We lost. He raised more money in interest income on his campaign treasury than we raised. It was not a fair fight, but one I'll always treasure. And I got to watch Pete DuPont. And later, 2 years later, I was elected state treasurer. He was elected governor. We had the worst credit rating in the country. We're dog meat. And we had the highest marginal personal income tax rate. We had the lowest marginal rate of small business startups. We had no pension fund. We had no cash management system. We were awful. And he provided great leadership. He worked with Democrats and Republicans. He surrounded himself with excellent people. And he was a kind, thoughtful person. I'm not sure he could get elected today as a Republican, but he turned out to be a great leader, and not an especially partisan one. And I learned a lot from him. I'll always be grateful for the leadership that he provided. And leadership is the key to the success of any organization I've ever been a part of. It's always leadership. And on the committee that deals with clean air, clean water, climate change, and infrastructure, roads, highways, bridges, water. The Shelley Capito, Republican from West Virginia, and I provide leadership. When we did the water bill a couple of weeks ago, we'd asked every member of the Senate, Democrat and Republican, to give us their input, to offer amendments, and we coupled them together in a manager's amendment. We've asked the same thing for the roads, highways, bridges legislation, service transportation. We asked literally 100 senators to give us their input and their advice from their states. That's the way to get things done.
And finally, Congresswoman.
Yeah, you know what? I first want to start off by saying that, Pete DuPont, I mean, you think of who we are as a state and just some of the foundational things that he did to bring us to this place. And I think back to working with then Governor Carper, and when he was in Congress.
Well, actually, I worked for Lisa.
Yeah. But, there did seem to be a different way of working. I think the reality is, and I can't speak for the Republican Party, I think they are having their own internal discussions about who they are and who they want to be. I'm actually I'm a classmate of Liz Cheney's. So I get to talk to her routinely about some of the challenges that they face internally. But what I will say is, what I find to be successful is when we try to find those things that we do have in common, which is why I started this Bipartisan Future Work Caucus, because issues of broadband and access to internet, we have seen whether you are in a rural area, a suburban area, or an urban area, we are all having challenges as a country. And so this is an area we've been able to come together on. I look at even the expansion of telehealth. This is an area we've been able to come together on. And so as hard as this moment is, trying to find those opportunities to come together has been, a primary focus. Apprenticeships and making sure that we have training dollars and workforce development, because we know that it's important for our country. Clean slate, my legislation, Clean Slate, which is allowing individuals who serve their time for a low-level offense to be able to come out. It's bipartisan, and it is a national movement. We have to work on those things that we can work on together. But at the same time, what President Biden has shown us is that sometimes it can't be about the party politics within Congress. It's got to be, what do the people want? What do the people need? And I think in passing the American Rescue Plan, we saw a sense of urgency that required us to say, this is for the people. And so as we go into these next two plans, I think there's conversation that is happening right now. My two senators are right at the table as well, ensuring that there are real, robust, bipartisan conversations. But at the end of the day, it is about, are we healthy? Is our economy strong? Are we looking at things through an equity lens? And that's what this administration is doing. And that's why these first 100 days, I think, are symbolic of what we can see for this term, as well as the Biden-Harris second term. I put that out there. Just heard
it here first, folks. Sarah, take it away.
Yeah, so I had a few questions as well. Again, thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I wanted to start with a question about minimum wage. This is particularly for the senators, but Representative, please feel free to chime in on this as well. Senators, back in March, you voted against a proposal, I believe it was from U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. You both voted against it, citing the concern of imminently burning businesses that are trying to recover from the pandemic. I'm wondering if your views on minimum wage have changed since then.
Who would you like to go first?
Sarah,
Senator Coons.
it'd be great if you'd get the factual background more accurate. What we voted against was a budget proposal in the middle of what's called Vote-A-Rama. We were trying to get the American Rescue Plan passed. And as a Senate, we had been told by the parliamentarian that if we actually adopted Senator Sanders' proposal, it would bring down the entire bill. So the way you pose the question makes it sound as if there was a bill on the floor that had any path towards enactment and that we stood against it. That's not accurate. This was an amendment to the American Rescue Plan, which, if adopted, would have prevented the entire American Rescue Plan from going forward. That's the context in which a number of senators stood up and said, we shouldn't be adopting this if it's going to tank the possibility of our sending out support checks, stimulus checks to 160 million Americans and getting vaccines in 200 million arms over the next few months, which was the president's principal move forward. Since then, there's been a series of meetings that Senator Carper and I have participated in with Senator Sanders, with Senator Manchin, with Senator Sinema, and a number of others, trying to come up with a bipartisan package that can actually pass the Senate, which we don't have a path for because we have to have 10 Republican votes in order to get anything done in the Senate that, other than the one time a year we've been able so far to do what's called reconciliation. I know that may sound procedural, but there is still a filibuster in the United States Senate. And so we have to get 50 Democrats first on board with some proposal and then find a way towards 10 Republicans. I think the federal minimum wage is far too low. We should raise it. We should raise it in a way that also puts in place an annual escalator so that it keeps going up year over year, which in some ways is the most important thing we could do. When President Obama was president, there was a campaign to raise it to 1010. We were able to get a bill moving forward that would have raised it to 9 and added the escalator. If we had done that then, we'd have a federal minimum wage close to 15 today. There are two other provisions in the bill that Bernie Sanders put forward. One of them I had problems with that has to do with how people with severe disabilities are treated in the workplace. Senator Sanders and I have since come to an understanding and worked that out. And I appreciate the chance to work with him on addressing that one provision that concerned me based on some real pointed advocacy from some Delawareans.
Chris has laid it out very well. I was in 1916, my senior year at Ohio State. I was Navy ROTC midshipman about to head off for Pensacola in Southeast Asia. And I worked, I had a scholarship that paid my tuition for the Navy. And I worked a couple of jobs. One of the jobs I worked was a minimum wage job. And the other job, I washed pots and pans in order to get my meals. But my 1960, I think I was paid $1.60 an hour. I'm told now that in terms of real purchasing power, that was like the zenith, the high point of the minimum wage in terms of what it bought in the economy at that time. And as Chris has mentioned, that what happened over time, we'll go 5 years, 10 years without adjusting the minimum wage. And one of the most important things to do is to have some kind of escalator that reflects the cost of living as it rises. If you would actually go back to 1968 and take $1.60 an hour and adjust it for inflation coming up to today, it would be about just under, I think, $12 an hour. $12 an hour. And I think a good compromise would be to move us maybe over a couple of years to 12 or 13 bucks an hour, and then make sure that we have that escalator in places. So it's doesn't stay 12 bucks an hour for the next 10 years as well. The other thing, when I was governor, we raised the minimum wage 2 or 3 times. We raised it during Bill Clinton was president. It was a very strong economy and one of the strongest economic expansions in the history of the country. And the businesses were looking for people, finding it hard to find people. And and so it's not hard to push through and increase the minimum wage. When I sat down as governor, I think the minimum wage in Delaware was $1 over what the national minimum wage was. And so I would just suggest that minimum wage is something that should be adjusted. The idea of doing it right now to $50 an hour in the middle of the worst worst economy we've had since the Great Depression, I'm not sure the timing is good. By the beginning of next year, my hope is that we can move it up closer to $12 and then raise it in the future, raise it in accordance with the cost of living.
And let's be clear on that point, Tom. Even Senator Sanders' proposed amendment to the American Rescue Plan didn't raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It set us on a path over 4 years to raise it to $15. What we're going to end up debating, and I hope ultimately passing, is a path that will immediately increase the minimum wage significantly, hopefully by 50% or more, and then put us on a similar path as what Senator Sanders has laid out, where over several years we will get to $15 an hour and have an annual escalator.
And Sarah, if I could just add, for me, this, as the former Secretary of Labor under Governor Carper at the time, CEO of the Urban League, State Personnel Director, this issue is vital. The House has already introduced and passed the minimum wage bill. As the senator mentioned, it isn't $15 immediately. There is a path. I am very supportive of the escalator. I think that is an incredible addition that needs to be there. And I would just say that as we even looked at this past pandemic, particularly women, they called it a she-cession because over 4 million women left the workplace and only 2 million have come back. And in the month of April, there were no women. And women are a predominant group that are affected by the minimum wage as well. And we need to look at this not back from the days when I was a teenager and it was teenagers. There are many people in our country that are working at minimum wage jobs, and they should be able to, if they're working these jobs, they should be able to support their families. And that's what our hope and that's what our goal is. And that's why I am so proud to be supporting the minimum wage and see it as a priority for the state of Delaware as well. So I support our colleagues here in Delaware that are also on that path.
Thank you. And Senator Coons, if I characterized that proposal as a bill instead of an amendment, I apologize. I wanted to kind of ask a follow-up to that. It's a conversation that we're hearing a lot in Delaware and across the country about as businesses are opening back up. They're actually some of them are having trouble hiring people, even though there are still many people on unemployment. I'm wondering what you believe is keeping people from returning to work.
Are you asking me?
It's Representative, you can go first.
Yeah, first of all, I think that what happens is a lot of times people oversimplify it and they say, oh, it's the wages. No, oh, it's, it's fear of COVID, that there are people that are still afraid. But there are also things that help people get to work, such as childcare. That's why the president's efforts for the American Family Plan are so important. I just mentioned how many women have left the workplace, and many times it is because of caregiving issues that now research and studies are showing that. And so I think that the other piece is that people are also reassessing what they want to do with their lives. I was talking to an employer here in Delaware on Friday, and he was saying that people are now coming to work and don't want to stay in a job because they're now reassessing what their life has been. And that's why the gig economy and our work on the future of work is so important, because we're going to have to meet the new demands for today. So I think getting our expectations correct, that we had some good job gains in the first few months, but that the more we get vaccines in arms, the more people can go back to work and the more people feel safe, and that we provide them the support so that they can work, I think then that is going to strengthen our economy, and we will see people going back to work in a strong, effective, and healthy way.
Senator Coons?
Sarah, I think there's a range of factors that contribute to a lot of folks being hesitant to return to work. And I completely agree with the Congresswoman. There are quite a few families that have challenges. Schools are not fully reopened. There are lots of parents who are essentially supervising or homeschooling their kids. There are lots of families that have additional either childcare or family member care burdens that they haven't worked out yet. There's folks who are hesitant to come back to work. I've had that challenge in my own office, who, after spending a year or more in their homes or apartments, aren't yet fully comfortable, particularly in the service industry, in a role where they'd be directly interacting with customers day in, day out. And I do think the $300 a week additional unemployment benefit has created some disincentive for some folks to return to work. But we can't point at any one of those and say that's the sole factor or the main factor. One other issue, I talked to a number of business owners in the last few days from the beach area, from Sussex, who are very concerned about how hard it is for them to hire people to reopen on Memorial Day. Let's just remember the last administration cut legal immigration into this country in half. And before the pandemic, we relied on J1 and H2B visa holders to do an awful lot of the work in hospitality and in areas, whether from golf courses and landscaping to beach resorts and places like Funland. So we have to address all of these. Wages have to rise. Folks have to be vaccinated and confident they can return to work safely. We have to deal with reopening schools. And by September, that additional supplement is going to go away. So we've been having vigorous debates within the Democratic caucus in the Senate about what, if any, adjustments we should make in the coming weeks to provide encouragement, incentives, and support for transportation, for daycare, for school issues, to make sure that those who are ready to return to work do.
Yeah. When Lisa was the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, Social Services, and then later as Secretary of Labor, she was part of a team that suggested if we really want to help people get off of welfare, we ought to make sure that they're better off working than they are on welfare. And what we did is we focused on trying to make sure that people had training for jobs that were out there in demand, not being filled. We tried to make sure that if people needed transportation to get to a job, they got that they wouldn't lose their health care if they went to work, that they'd all kinds of things. We wanted people to be better off. So the smart economic decision for them would be to go to work and take advantage of these other things. When we were getting into the debate last year as to should there be a supplemental federal unemployment benefit, I think just about everybody said, yeah, it makes sense. We're in the worst recession since the Great Depression. That makes some sense. There was a considerable debate on how much that should be, how much the federal supplement should be. And it started off, I think, at $400 a week. And the question is, how long should it remain at that level? And we put it in place for a couple of months, but not permanently. And then we came back and we debated earlier again, I'm going to say maybe 6 months ago, at what level should the federal unemployment supplement be? And we agreed on $300, and we negotiated. We went through another debate another month ago. I suggested to my colleagues that what we do is actually, as the economy gets stronger, and it is getting stronger, gradually step that down from $300 a week to $200 a week to $100 a week, and eventually to zero when we get into September. But not to have a cliff-like effect, which our Republican colleagues want to do. They want to cut it off tomorrow. The smart way to do it, and this is what Joe Biden's trying to convince us to do, suggests that we do in one of his proposals, make sure that the economic conditions in a particular state reflect what and help determine what the federal supplement would be. If you got a state with an unemployment rate of 12%, they may need a little bit of extra help for federal unemployment benefits. If you got a state with an unemployment rate of 4%, maybe not so much. And what I've suggested to my colleagues is we phase down and phase out by sometime in September the federal unemployment supplement. Right now, somebody in Delaware if they're getting the max unemployment benefit from the state, it's $400 a week. If they get the $300 from the federal government, that's $700 a week. That's about $3,000 a month. And for people, there are a number of people, it's like the smart economic decision for a lot of people is, I'm going to stay home and collect that, take care of my kids. And we have to be smarter than this. And I think there's a good way to do it. And the president's suggesting in the future, let's make sure that if there's going to be a federal unemployment supplement, it actually reflects the economic condition and unemployment rate of a particular state.
Thank you, Senator. Well, we're just about at time, and so I want to thank our guests, Representative Blunt Rochester, Senator Coons, Senator Carper for joining us. Thank you, too, to Meredith and Sarah for some excellent questions. I hope we can do this again soon.
Yes. Those are excellent questions, but how about those answers?
Yeah. Thanks, Senator. We hope we can do this again. Just a programming note for us, you can join the community conversation in Delaware by visiting delawareonline.com/opinion. We welcome your letters and your op-ed pieces about things that are happening in the first state. So jump in, join the conversation. Again, senators, congresswoman, thank you. Have a great day. Thank you all for joining us.
Let's do this again, okay?
We'll do.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Meredith. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you so much.
Lisa.
Take care.
Thanks.